says Mark Twain Cave discovered 1819.
I'm looking at it.
Oh,
I'm looking at it.
Robbie, look at this.
Can you feel it? I can feel it. I can feel it.
All right, everybody, we're going to get into the theater house right here through the blue door. We have a short video. It is 7 minutes long. It talks about history, science, first explorers.
But I never tired of exploring the cave.
The cave burned itself into Sam's memory.
Tom Sawyer knew as much of the cave as anyone.
The Adventures of Tom Sawyer was published in 1876, and soon people were coming from all over the country to see the cave and other places in town described in the book. The number of people visiting the cave steadily increased, until at last a man named John East established the first official guided service in 1886, making Mark Twain Cave the first show cave in Missouri. It has been open to the public ever since. The tours were given by lantern until 1939, when electricity was first installed. Looking at a map of the cave system, you can see by its maze-like pattern how easy it would be for early explorers to become lost, and many did at one time or another.
Entrance. Discovery Entrance is where Jack Sims found our cave all that time ago, 1819, during the winter. That was while he was on a cougar hunt, thus the cougar. Then, tourists started to come along because of the books. That was in the 1860s time period, and they didn't want to go up there. John East, the first guide, listened. He dug himself out an entrance on the other side of the hill. However, it had structural issues not long after. So then we had to make another entrance. Here it is, our 1890 entrance. He blasted it open with a few friends of his and some dynamite. We've been using it ever since. Yes.
I'm cold already.
Everybody. So, welcome everybody. It's a cave and a tour. The exit is that way. Alright, so we're going to talk about what we're seeing. Above us there is a very large crack. Once upon a time, Missouri was under an inland sea, so essentially the Mississippi was very, very flooded. Then it came over to this area, and while it was over this area, there was a giant crack that formed due to the pressures. So, water started coming into that crack, and over time it made it deeper and wider. Then it left, and we had glaciers come through, carved out the parking lot most of you guys are probably in. And then with that glacier came more water and carved it down just a little bit more, and also gave us clay, glacial clay. That is what we're walking on today. So if you look down below you, that is not cement, that's not dirt we brought in here, that is clay from the glaciers that came in all that time ago. It's been stamped very nice, firm, and flat by people coming in here over the last 200 years as explorers and tourists. When it comes to the rock we have around us, this is limestone. Limestone acts as an insulator, which is why it's so cold in here. It's 52 degrees. Limestone also absorbs sound. So, when it comes to absorbing sound, sometimes I'll stop talking around corners just because some people at the very end can't hear me. If you can't hear something that's not you, that's simply me not actually talking. When it comes to other things throughout the limestone, you might notice the coloration, the texture, so on and so forth. We have Louisiana or lithographic limestone here at the Mark Twain Caves. Louisiana because it's between here and Louisiana, Missouri, about 30 minutes from here that this specific limestone is found. And lithographic because it was used during the early ages of the printing press. We also have minerals along the route. Most likely you'll be seeing calcite nodules. I have my flashlight on one over here on the left-hand side. Calcite nodules are the purest form of limestone. Now usually when you hear the purest form of anything, you think it would be valuable, but that's not the case. Much like the limestone that it comes from, calcite nodules are soft. They rank a 3. On the same scale, the diamond is a 10. For further reference, on the same scale, your fingernail is a 2.5. This is only 0.5 harder than your fingernail. Because of that, I ask that you do not touch or try to scratch any of the minerals that might be within reach along the route today. The last thing I'm going to talk about is that we do have quite a few signatures here in our cave. If you need to hold on to the rock at any point in time for ease of mind, keep from slipping, falling, anything like that, please make sure you do so by asking you don't specifically touch it to try and scratch into it. That is a federal offense, and it is punishable by law, and none of us want to sign a bunch of paperwork or give up a bunch of money because we decided to scratch our name into a cave wall. Because of the books, Mark Twain tells us of Tom and Becky, who are two childhood lovers, dropping love letters for each other at this location. Mark Berkman was a St. Louis cartoonist in the early 1900s. It is an image of Mark Twain. This is a very spiffy-looking image of Mark Twain. Most people do not draw him like this. Most people stuff to the
How about you walk for a minute?
You're good.
That's called the post office,
I know.
where they would leave each other letters. This is really neat. This cave is cool. You like it? Would you like to be a little kid and explore this, Robbie? I can see why they love climbing and exploring in here. Jeez. Cool.
This area is known as Grand Avenue. Grand Avenue is the longest, the widest, and the deepest part of the entire cave.
Wow.
When it comes to length, Grand Avenue runs end to end for 1,100 feet. When it comes to depth, we are 257 feet underground right now. Once again, not miles. Don't worry if you don't like the idea of being even that far underground. This is the deepest point, so it gets better going onwards. Way back in that direction, we have the Jesse James signature passage. So, Big Bad Jesse James, the hardened criminal, came to this point in the cave to hide. The reason he did so is because he had first gone to the circus. He'd been hiding on the Tucker farm, not far away from here, when he heard the circus was coming to town. He left his hiding hole, went to the circus with Tucker, and there they were spotted by the sheriff. The sheriff chased the two men out of the circus, and it was closer to come here to the caves than go all the way back to the Tucker farm, so that's what they did. They hid back in that passageway, and as their little ha-ha, we got away at the end of the day, they signed their names and dated it, September 22nd, 1879, the day they escaped the sheriff by hiding here in the cave system. The reason we do not go back there is because it is 11 inches at its narrowest, about 35-degree angle to one side, and there's a 5-foot drop-off near the end of that passageway. So we don't want to get anywhere close to any of those things. Even further back, we have McDougal Chamber. Do you guys like weird, scary stories?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm hearing a lot of yes if you're thinking, no, I'm sorry, we're telling one anyways. So, Dr. Joseph Nash McDowell is known as Missouri's mad scientist. He did so because he was known for peculiar experiments and running essentially a black market for dead bodies. Okay, so when it comes to the dead bodies, he would dig up recently deceased people from their graves and sell them to medical students and other people who want bodies for experimentation. When it comes to experiments he himself did often, that is how he got the bodies for them. However, on this occasion here, he used the body of his recently deceased daughter, Amanda. who passed away at age 14 from pneumonia. He hung her body in a copper and glass cylinder filled with an alcohol medicinal solution in that back chamber between two poles with a supporting chain from the ceiling. The purpose of this experiment was to petrify her body, see if he could turn to stone, essentially a fossil. So, he left that here, we're talking the 1840s. Tourism for the books didn't happen until the 1860s. Meaning this was the period of time where children were allowed to play in the caves. So the individuals who found the body at that location were 13 and 14-year-old boys and girls. And no one believed them. Their parents didn't believe them, and the younger siblings also didn't believe them. They started to get desperate. Finally, they drugged their younger siblings back there to prove to them that they weren't out of their minds, and now that the younger siblings were also sharing in this story and couldn't sleep at night, the parents decided it was time to investigate. They found the body, news spread like wildfire. And then, as people heard about the body, some people wanted to come and see it. And this was now a tourist attraction. People were brought in here by local Hannibal residents for the spooky experience. You paid 10 cents to go on a candlelit tour back to that location, hear a weird story, see the body, and leave. Yeah. And this went on for quite a while, and nobody told McDowell because it was profitable. And he found out on his own. And he was furious. He came here to Hannibal again, removed the body from the cave, and made a public statement about how disappointed he was. I get it, it's a twisted thing to do, but also he's a hypocrite. We already know why, black market and all that good stuff. So, he takes the body to a coroner or forensic expert in St. Louis because now that the experiment's over, he wants to know how successful it might have been. He asked the man how long he thought the girl's body had been deceased. The guy said 5 or so months. The body had been in here around 3 years. Meaning that the experiment was in part successful. Somebody lost a shoe.
Oh, thank you.
So, the experiment was partly successful. He wanted to continue it. However, the law in St. Louis had him on a very short leash because of the whole black market thing he was running. And so he was threatened that if he had another body and did another experiment, he would go to jail permanently, not ever to come out. So he decided he would wait until he himself could use his body. So on his deathbed, he asked his relatives to dig through his writing desk and find the instructions for this particular experiment and then continue it on him. They said no. They eventually burned the writing desk entirely with all his different writings mostly in it. They also sold the cave about 4 months later. They tried to really wipe McDowell from their family history, and to this day, they do not associate with the Hannibal area or the story we have here. And that is the end of the story of Dr. Joseph Nash McDowell, who is in fact a real guy who is absolutely insane. And right after we tell the story about the weird guy and the body in the cave, we turn off all the lights. I'm going to be very blunt with you guys. It's going to get dark. Please make sure you stay closer to those you trust, further from those you don't. If you're able to turn off your individual devices, I ask that you do so. This includes phones, cameras. If you have stomp shoes that light up, please don't stomp. Last warning, get closer to those you like, further from those you don't. Lights going out. Wow. This is all early explorers would have had to see with. It's all young children had to explore with also. So we hear the stories of Tom and Huck and Becky that Mark Twain wrote. Becky's birthday, she's turning 10. They have a party for her outside on the hill. They come in here to the cave to play, that's a normal thing. Then Tom leads the way, that's a normal thing. And then Tom gets a little bit carried away and egotistical. He's trying to impress Becky, and he leads everybody past the point he knows. Now the other children decide, hey, Tom's bluffing it at this point. We should probably turn back. So then Tom and Becky are left to wander alone. And Tom's kind of excited, Becky's kind of nervous. She kind of wants to go back, he's thinking no. So they come to this point here, and suddenly they both get a little excited. It's a big room. Neither of them have ever seen this area before. They think they're probably the first ones to ever find it. They start to kind of wander up back and forth. They can tell that the ground is pretty smooth and soft. So they start to have fun in here. They run back and forth. They start to hoop and holler. And it's at the hooping and hollering part that things start to go wrong. Because if you recall, there was something above us on the ceiling. And so, as those children hooped and hollered, they woke up all those bats. And those bats started to chase the children around, and now they were terrified. They tried to find the exit out, only to trip And guess what happened to those candles when the children fell? And this is what you're left with. This is total darkness. There is no light in here except for what we ourselves bring in. In total darkness, you see nothing. Tom and Becky went off in that direction to find their way out. What direction? Exactly. I'll help you out. It's over there. Alright. So Tom and Becky went off in that direction. But, you know, first and foremost, a little bit more information about total darkness. I'll keep the lights off for a moment longer. If you're in total darkness for about an hour, you will start to hallucinate. All right, this is the end of the guide portion of the tour. Thank you guys so much for joining me. The exit is that way, and left. All right, I'll do that. When it comes to hallucination, that is actually a real threat. It's not going to be like you see in the movies with someone suddenly imagining something running at them. Mostly what you're going to do is have your mind fill in gaps. Sometimes after you've been in here a while, you might put your hand to your face and you think, oh, I can see my hand. No, you can't. But you know your hand's there. You know what shape you're making with it, and so thus you think you see your hand. Your mind fills in the gaps. The same thing can happen if you're running against the wall. You think you know what it looks like simply because you can feel it. Your mind knows it's there. We're going to continue the story in the parlor room. As we go there, however, we're going to pass the E. Tucker signature that's up here on the left-hand side. We're also going to pass by the Wishing Well and Straddle Passage. When it comes to C.E. Tucker's signature, he actually has 250 some of them here in the caves. When he said that he knew the caves better than any other man, that was something he bragged, he meant it. Tucker really did know his way around the caves. He has only about 10 signatures short of the total number of passages here in our cave system. I think he was probably tuckered out after all that work. What do you think?
It's a cool floor. It feels cool.
Over here we have the guiding hand formation. At the Alligator, I mentioned that landmarks were used by early explorers. This is one of those. Shaped like with a hand finger pointing in the direction outwards. However, as I said, that was for early explorers. We no longer have those limitations, so we can go off in this direction instead. Please do continue to watch your step and watch your head as we come through these passages. We are going to be passing over the Wishing Well area. The Wishing Well is where we collect funds for the Tom and Becky Scholarship. Tom's and Becky's are children here in Hannibal who auditioned for a little over 6 months to obtain the role of one of the characters. Of the 160-some children who auditioned, we have 10 Toms and Becky's, 5 Toms, 5 Becky's chosen. They go around, they visit with tourists, they take photos, they talk. We have the funds here collected for scholarships.
I'm not telling you my
They collect those scholarships when they get to the point of secondary education. They can use those for university, college, or trade school. Alright, I am going to be turning off the lights. The folks right by the Wishing Well, you will have lights around your foot areas. We continue onwards. We're entering Straddle Pass. Straddle Pass is an area once upon a time that had very thick, wet clay. Thick, wet clay in a cave is a very bad thing because if you get it on your shoes and you need to climb out of a place you fall down into, it's pretty much impossible. That's because your feet are suddenly very heavy from the amount of clay on them, and they're also slippery. So it's a very bad idea to go into any area that had this thick, wet clay because it made not only that travel hazardous, but any point afterwards very dangerous. So when people knew they were getting to a point where there was thick, wet clay, they would hoist themselves up on the wall with one foot on either side of the passage, walk alongside here. That is known as straddling. It's commonly seen during spelunking, which is where things are wet inside cave systems. We're passing through the parlor room area. Parlors during the time Mark Twain was a place where you would entertain guests. Now what we do here is we tell a clip or a small part of the story. If you want to sit down for about 2 or 3 minutes, feel free to do so. If you're in shorts, I do warn you it's pretty cold. You can sit down over here on the elongated love seat. You can climb up onto the sofa also if you'd like. Just make sure that you're watching your step as you do so. Footsteps. And then he saw something, he saw a light. So he thinks they're found. The judge, the sheriff, somebody has found them, they're gonna be okay. And then it's not. He instead sees Injun Joe turn the corner at the bottom. Injun Joe's the villain of the story. Tom had seen him murder a man. And then Tom had testified in court against him. Now, when they got to this point here in the cave, he didn't know where to go next. They were lost, they were alone, and now there was a villain, an absolute murderer right here, and he could tell that Joe still had his knife with him. He was terrified. He came back this direction, told Becky what was going on. They decided the safest way out was probably that way. So that's where they headed, back to where they came from. Joe has a different interpretation of what happened. You see, he thinks that because he saw a person and heard voices, that these are scouts from the cave that the sheriff has sent. And that sheriff is going to come here and either shoot him or take him back to jail. So what he does is he takes his one and only light, smashes it so no one can see him from a distance, collects the pieces, and goes off in that direction. Now, fingers crossed for Tom and Becky, they could use a little luck and we're going to figure out what happens. If everybody could get up and follow me. We are passing by the treasure room. In the story, this is where Tom and Huck found $1,200 in gold coins. You can peek over the edge and see what we have down there. Kind of a box of money like they had found. When they got into town, the children made it public knowledge that these two boys were rich. And the judge figured that was a very bad idea. He decided that he would instead confiscate the money and put it in a bank account. He then gave that money to the boys when they were older and more responsible. We're also passing by the devil's backbone. Scientifically, this is called a vertical bridge formation. As you saw or see, there is a large part sticking up and down, which is very abnormal considering the rest of the rock runs horizontally. This was left behind after a whirlpool came through this area and carved away the clay and soft rock. So once again, the treasure room where Tom and Huck found $1,200 in gold coins and a devil's backbone, which is actually just a large vertical bridge formation. We are going to be entering 5 points in just a little bit. 5 points is the largest merging of passages here on our route today. That kid's drop off is really good.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
5 points ahead of us here is where we have the largest merging of passages in the Mark Twain Cave.
Wait, did the
We're coming
kids
down
drop down
point
there?
1, point 2 is on the left. It has a yellow light. That is where Norman Rockwell stood to paint. He was well known for the art he produced. He actually produced a series of images for the Mark Twain books, which were later used as the illustrations in a publication of it. We also have the 5th point with a blue light. The 5th point with the blue light is where the oldest signature in the cave resides. Beach and Seal Explorers, 1820. Beach and Seal being two friends of Jack Sims.
Can they block that off? Because that's the oldest signature in the cave.
Please watch your step as you come upward.
Come on, baby. Come on, we gotta walk.
We're going to be reaching the highest point of the cave with only about 30 foot of rock above our heads. Because we're so high up, highly acidic mineral water drips down, and when it solidifies, it deposits all those minerals into what we know as flowstone, stalactites, and stalagmites. We're going to start seeing formations, guys. The glacier and cascades are both flowstone. Flowstone takes 100 years to form 1 cubic inch. That means the formations we have here at the Mark Twain Caves are thousands of years old. As we turn the corner ahead, I would ask that everyone
Is that where it looks like it's melting?
the cascades. It kind of does look like it's melting down.
Yeah. That's cool.
This is my favorite part right here.
Look at that.
It tastes like.
Aladdin's Palace is the only place in the Mark Twain Caves that Mark Twain himself actually named. He named it because he saw a silhouette of the dome of the Taj Mahal in the Bronx, and the Taj Mahal is tied to the Arabian Nights story from which Aladdin comes. We also have the frozen waterfall. Those are calcium, calcite, magnesium, cave onyx, and gypsum. So once again, we have Aladdin's Palace, the only place in the cave that Mark Twain himself named. Frozen Waterfall, which is a giant stalagmite and stalactite coming down from the right. And Rainbow Grotto, where over crystals are formed together in clusters. As we go onwards, please be aware that it is going to get a little bumpy, especially for those in strollers. It'll be a little bit more difficult. We're passing by the John East entrance 2 times. This first passage is not where people came down. It's simply at the end. You can see daylight coming in.
The frozen waterfall.
That's pretty cool.
Okay, funky through here, baby.
It's okay, I'll watch me stop.
We turn the corner ahead. We're going to be heading towards the John East entrance, where people came down during the 1860s for about a 3-year period of time before we had to blast open new entrances. Well, I guess it's a little bit more than a 3-year period of time.
Your head. Stay in the middle, okay?
So, as you can tell by the name Devil Slide, that was not a good idea in the end.
Maybe we shouldn't do that.
No, we shouldn't.
Good tip.
I love when you forget.
You can do it. I just want to get your head okay.
All right. Everybody can come up to this point right here. You can scoot, scoot, scoot. Hopefully we fit everybody into this one narrow passageway so everyone can see Discovery entrance.
Oh, look at there. So I had to climb up there and then scramble down this rocky...
And to come down this area here. Discovery entrance is where our cave was found. It's where the adventure began with Jack Sims. This is also where our adventure today essentially ends. However, we first finished the story. This is where Tom and Becky finally made their way out. However, when Joe tried to come out this way also, he couldn't. That's because the judge had boarded up the cave after declaring it was too dangerous for anybody to come back in. And that's the end of the story. That story's also fake. So please do not be concerned about Injun Joe. Mark Twain is famously known as a fiction writer, meaning that, well, a lot of stuff might have been inspired by real life or real life possible things. That in itself did not happen. Alright, welcome back everybody. The tour's almost done. I'll first talk about our situation. One man's trash, another man's treasure. We have this glass case over here. This junk was found in the cave during the 1939 lighting system period of time. However, because it's old junk, we call it artifacts. We also have a bookshelf. We have 2 signatures on the top. The left is Jesse James. The one beside it is the Clemens signature, much larger with no screen in front of it. Under his neck is the Norman Rockwell image. I mentioned him briefly when we went through 5 points. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this tour, feel free to let somebody else know. If you didn't, I do take constructive criticism. I get that I'm not perfect. Nobody is. However, if this was a gosh darn awful tour, my name was Michael. Complain as much as you like to management.
It was really good.
Did you enjoy the Mark Twain Cave?
Yeah.
Do you think that would be fun for kids to run in there like Mark
Yeah.
Twain?
Yeah. It was really, really fun.